Hello?
Yes. This is Sheriff Deputy Officer Dover, Officer Ben Dover, and I'm looking for a suspect. I was hoping you could help me find him.
Officer Dover, who are you looking for?
I'm looking for a suspect by the name of Ron, first name Mo. That's Ron, first name Mo.
Mo. Whoa, wait a minute. You're trying to make me say moron. What kind of call is, who is this? Wait, Kevin, is this you seriously?
You've been fished.
No, dude. No, this is not how phishing works, man. You don't just call somebody and play a prank.
What do you mean? You know what that is? That is human hacking. I've been looking it up, and when you get someone on the phone and you trick them, that is phishing.
Okay, let me tell you what. You're wrong. That's first thing. Secondly, let's go learn about it. I have a guest on the show tonight that's going to teach us all about the phishing and the vishing and the smishing and the whaling, and they're going to give us the knowledge that will educate you and help you learn how this was just a prank.
Okay.
Let's go find out what it is. Yeah, let's jump in it. Episode 11, The Fine Art of Social Engineering. Welcome to the Cyber Distortion Podcast. We are now on our 11th episode of Season 1, and this has been a really fun ride for Kevin and I. And as Kevin and I were talking about what we wanted to have in this next episode, we spent a lot of time trying to create a diverse set of topics that we can bring to all of you. And this topic is a great one. We have not had this on our episode, and it's something that is so key to the cyber security world. It needs to have a dedicated episode around it to capture the essence of how important it really is. We're going to be covering this controversial topic in the cybersecurity world called social engineering. If you don't know what that is, some people refer to it as human hacking, but I'll give you a better description of what it is. In the context of information security, social engineering is the psychological manipulation of people into performing actions or divulging confidential information. Man, that's a lot of human manipulation, if you ask me. But it is an art. And tonight we have a special guest, and this guest is going to tell us all about the ins and outs of social engineering at a very detailed level. So I want to bring on to our podcast Bridget Sageng, and Bridget is an ethical hacker from Norway with Orange Cyberdefense. She has a background in the field of human psychology and healthcare, and she loves understanding the human mind and IT security and where those two converge. She specializes in social engineering and open source investigations, and is the winner of the first collegiate international social engineering contest hosted by Temple University. In 2021, she also became a certified social engineering pen test professional. Bridget knows her stuff, and I've listened to some of the work that she has done, and oh my gosh, I am floored when I listen to her execute one of these pen tests. It is phenomenal, man. I think she should do a movie around it. It would be that good. Right? So, with all of that aside, Bridget, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, guys. It's really exciting to be here. As you said, I work at Orange Cyberdefense in Norway as an ethical hacker, and part of my job is to do social engineering pen tests. which basically means that I test the human element of security. And that means that I do some phishing campaigns, or that I also go out and do physical tests at sites to test if the human elements can keep people out of their systems, basically.
Mm.
Wow. Well, Bridget, it's a pleasure to have you on. I got to listening and found out about you through doing a little bit of research on the social engineering element of hacking, and found out about the collegiate challenge. Saw that you were the champion of the challenge in 2020, and thought, oh, I need to get her on the podcast. We need to bring her in and talk about what this entails, and get into it at a deeper level, and share this with the listeners. And I'm super excited about that. My first entry into anything around social engineering, I was at Black Hat. This would have been not Black Hat, Defcon, gosh, 25. This was 2017. And I'm standing in front of a door, and they just put the poster up, Social Engineering Village. And I'm like, what is this? I have no idea what this is. And asked the guy what it was going to be. And he said, yeah, they're going to do human hacking live. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Okay, where's the line for this? And he goes, you're standing in it. You're the first one in line. I'm like, oh, cool. All right, I'm going to wait. So 15 minutes later, I'm the first one walking through the door, and I see the booths. And I'm sure you've seen the booths. You know what I'm talking about. They put the contestants in these, basically it's almost like a soundproof booth. They've got headphones on like we do. They're on a stage in front of a couple hundred people doing this stuff live with a timer in front of them. And they've got all these different social engineering flags that they've got to capture. And it's just watching this live is a fascinating experience. And I was just like, man, this is so freaking cool, because this is not like any other, it wasn't like any other form of hacking that I'd ever seen. It's like, man, these are people. They're going after people. They're trying to get, within reason, they can only capture certain things live, because these are real phone calls they're doing. And the person on the other end has no idea they're being phished. And it's just cool. It's fun. I thought I'd go in there and dip in and catch 15, 20 minutes of it and then dip out. This is my first day at Defcon. So I'm like, I got to see everything. I was there 4 hours. Fascinating. I was just, dude, I had a front row seat, obviously, because I was the first one in the door. There was standing room only line out the door, people trying to get in for this. And I had no idea, because I didn't know anything about it. And I just got lucky and happened to be in the right place, the right time when they opened the door. I didn't want to give up my seat. I'm sitting there. I remember thinking, I really got to go pee, but I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to get up and lose my spot, because as soon as you get up and leave the room, man, it's open game. The next person waiting to come in, they're going to say, okay, you. So, I just sat there and, waited. 4 hours later, I'm just like, man, that was so cool. So I have a lot of mad respect for what you do.
So Bridget, really I think, it would be helpful maybe to give us some background on how did you get started in this?
Yeah, it was actually more of I just came over it after a couple of years in IT, because I started out doing IT support and worked my way through the ropes. And all of a sudden, I noticed that there was this element called social engineering when there were more talk about phishing emails and awareness around that. And while working, I decided to start doing my bachelor's in cybersecurity. And when I was doing that, I had this professor, Dr. Francois Mouton, who had written a doctorate in social engineering. And he kind of was like, oh, yeah, you got to check this out if you're interested. And then all of a sudden, he told me about the collegiate CTF at Temple University. And so I decided, but you know what, I should try and apply to this to see what, it's interesting. And I've always been interested in the human element and psychology, and this kind of combines the two worlds of IT and psychology together. So I applied, and all of a sudden I was accepted, and I was so nervous, to be honest. I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? I applied as a one-man team while the other were several others, and I think I was the only non-American, and this
Wow.
was during COVID, so I could stay at home in Norway doing this from my desk right here actually, and yeah, it was just like, oh, what am I supposed to do? And up until then, I had never done a vision call. I had done some CTFs doing OSINT through the Trace Labs CTFs, where they try to find cold cases and missing people. So I thought
Mm.
that's an interesting part. We're gonna do some of that, and then, oh wait, we're gonna actually call someone. And I mean, that was just close up to the beginning, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna start calling. I mean, it's still the judges I'm gonna call and do this towards, but it was scary, and
Yeah.
but it was also a major rush. So after that, yeah,
I can
it was.
imagine.
I mean, all of it, the whole element of actually finding information and then utilizing that information to try and capture the flags. It was thrilling. I felt like, okay, this is really interesting because this is not just ones and zeros. These are human beings, and there are so many elements to it. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I just after that I was hooked. Basically, I just had to.
Yeah. So to our
Yeah.
audience, this is the scenario where you're getting those phone calls and you're like, what is this about again? And you can't understand why you're getting this call, but they're asking you a lot of questions leading to you giving away some information. And Bridget is one of the good guys and good women in this scenario where she's actually doing this stuff to help people get better, to figure out where the flaws are and how to get better at not falling for these types of things. But you can hopefully when we go through this show today, you'll get a better understanding of all of the things that are involved when a vishing attack or a phishing attack happens, a phone call or an email or a text message or any of those things are happening, there is a lot of background work and preparedness that goes in place before the actual event takes place so that they are as effective as possible when they execute that event. So this isn't just a simple random call that's being made to you or text message that's being made to you. There's work that's being done behind the scenes before they approach trying to get something from you. So it is very
Yeah.
important to be diligent and being aware of responding, not responding, or how you respond to a voice call or a text message or an email campaign that's being done against you.
Yeah, yeah, it's all social engineering. There's many facets to it. It's not just email, as Jason's saying, and to the audience that's listening, if you don't know this is out there and this is really happening, it's important that you understand what you're looking for. So Bridget's going to get into some of that. And Jason, you mentioned Bridget being one of the good people doing this. That's an important factor here. The white hat hackers are here to help us. They're here to educate us and tell us what we're doing wrong. And Bridget's got a talk coming up that she's going to get a chance to tell us about here in a little bit. That's all about the good and the bad side of that pen testing humans. So we'll get into that in a minute. But before we do, I think it's important, Jason, you touched on the many facets of this. And the OSINT side of it, Bridget, you mentioned preparing for a challenge like this or preparing for a white hat pen test, social engineering pen test. And there's so many pieces to that. And I think it would be interesting for us to get into that. And we'll throw a graphic on the screen and show some of the terminology and some of the pieces of a social engineering attack. But Bridget, do you mind talking to some of these pieces and kind of talk about what goes into each of these sections of preparing for a social
Oh
engineering
yeah,
event?
absolutely. Yeah. So all of these are some social engineering techniques that we use. It depends on the assignment, of course, but what is really important is that all of these are utilized by adversaries to different extents, And one of the more common ones, you can see that the first one there, baiting, which is has a USB stick on it. That's basically because it's a very popular term to just leave a USB stick out in the parking lot, and something about, curiosity killed the cat. People tend to, oh, this is nice. Let's try this. I need to see what's in there. Maybe I can find the owner. And it's even better if someone has written budget 2023 on it or salary 2023 on it.
Financials.
Yeah.
Bonuses.
Everyone wants to open it.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
Usually then there's might be some malware on it or spyware or stuff like that. So it depends on the scenario or what the adversaries wants. But usually that's what baiting is. You make something so alluring that you just want to, pick it up and take it inside. Sort of like, So just everyone should just don't pick up USB pens and put them into your computer. If it seems too good to be true, it is too good to be true. No one leaves around the budget or your salary on a USB pen out on the parking lot.
Yeah. And accidentally drops it right by your front door.
And the next one, catfishing, that is quite a popular term when people watch TikTok videos about people, basically dressing up, doing makeups, looking like, a totally different person, basically. And that's also what catfishing is all about. That is a person who tries to make themselves alluring to a target, to make them want to do stuff or to gain their trusts, basically. That's a very simple term for it. But you can be catfish, meaning that someone's trying to lure you into their sort of web and try to make you think that they are, more alluring to you than they really are, basically. And then you will either give them access or information, depending on what the adversary wants. And the pretexting, that is the one I use the most in my line of work. That is basically what I'm doing when, after information gathering, you try to create scenarios that you can use to gain whatever information you need. In a CTF, that would be flags, for instance, like get someone to open a web page or something like that. Usually it is all about either getting a phone number to someone or getting access or anything, basically. You just try to gather information you have, the intel you have, and then you try to use it in a scenario. And from experience, when people create a pretext for being there, it oftentimes ends up deviating from what you've written. So at least during Pentest, you can go in there thinking that I'm going to go in here with the pretext that I am here to fix the building, and this is the building owner, and you have everything lined up, and then you meet someone and there's like, oh, I need to be someone else, and then you have to make it up on the fly. But usually you have several elements to it, and then you make this pretext of who you can be, basically. And that's also the very most improv one. But you also make the pretext. I'm here because of this, and you have to be able to alter it. You have to have different pretexts. And adversaries, they usually have a reasoning. They have a reason for calling you. They have a reason for being there. There's always a part of their pretext. They create this whole scenario for why they're there or why they want the information, basically. And the phishing, the vishing, and the spear phishing, that's quite interesting because phishing is, people know this as you get the emails, for instance. It's the African prince or whatever you get. That was a very common one.
Yeah. I have an inheritance and I want to give it all to you.
Some rando that I've never met. Yeah,
but
you're the guy.
Spear phishing, which that is basically that you're trying to go straight to the target. Like, for instance, hi Jason. The mail would probably start with that. Hi Jason, and I met with, and then I met with Kevin here the other day, and he told me to contact you because I had this huge offer when it comes to the podcast. Can you please look at this document? Kevin told me to make you look at it as soon as possible before the next podcast, for instance.
Dang, that was good. It made me want to click on it.
I know. I'm thinking, could it be a
I know,
sponsor?
right? I know.
That's what we.
And
Let's do this. All right.
so that's basically the spear phishing. That's not the African prince or the lottery tickets. It's just basically you go towards the target. There's also the phishing parts, which we talked about, where usually it's the voice phishing, the calls and everything. There are also certain elements here that are not mentioned, such as smishing, which has become more and more popular these days, where you get a text message. People tend to think that no one wants to dupe you using text messages, like, oh, you got a link that DHL or UPS or whatever has delivered a packet and you need to claim it or verify it, and then you push the link, and then all of a sudden you either give up your credit card information or you end up downloading some malware to your phone, which basically is a keylogger or whatnot. So
I just got one of those a couple of days ago. Someone sends me a text message and said, "Hello." I'm like, okay, wait, first of all, if you send me a message saying hello, then there's something wrong with this. So I played along one message back. That's my limit, just to see where it's going to go. As I was telling you guys earlier, sometimes when I identify these potential, incidences happening, I like to play along a little bit with it. So I was like, yeah, who's this? And I kid you not, they came right back and says, "Oh, is this Jason?" And I'm like, yeah, I think this message is done. Because as soon as they get personal like that and they're being very on point, then they've already collected it. That's a sign, right? That they've already collected enough information that they're going to lead this somewhere that really isn't beneficial. I mean, you could continue to play with them if you wanted to, but their intent is to get information from you, right? So, a lot of people would see that as endearing. Oh my gosh, this person knows who I am. I have to answer them. I wonder who it could be. And for me, I'm just like, whatever. If you had to start the conversation as hello, then you must not know me well enough to want to have a conversation with me.
It is, and that's just some of the mediums. I mean, a lot of people think that people are just going to scam me through the phone, like, hello, I'm from Microsoft, and from a call center somewhere abroad, or a phishing email for lottery tickets or gift card buying or whatnot. But as you said, it's also text messages and also social media messages, and marketplace messages on Facebook is a very common place that people are trying to scam you these days. And also Craigslist. Don't you guys have that in the US, right?
Yes.
Yeah. There's also people trying to, hey, oh yeah, I want to buy that, but I got to send by courier. And then they're trying to make you got to pay.
Right.
But I will send you the money through a courier. And so there are different ways that these are trying to lure you in. And depending on, some of them are very standard, like there's the Microsoft, the African Princess and whatnot. But then there's also the more spared ones, as Hi Jason, for instance. So there are different degrees as this. Like, for instance, whaling is also a thing that's not here. But that's basically, for instance, phishing just against the big whales or the bosses of a company, for instance. They're trying to get the big fish. So that's why it's called phishing, by the way. You're trying to fish and see who's getting hooked. So
trying to lure them in.
Yeah,
and snag them.
I tell you, and one that was going around a few years ago, I haven't heard of it here recently, is I got a call from my parents, and my dad says, "Hey, are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay. What are you talking about?" He's like, "Oh, I've been worried all day. I got a call early this morning saying that, and they said it was you. You called me. Didn't you call me?" I'm like, "No, I didn't call you." He's like, "Well, whoever it was called me and said, 'Hey, it's Jason. I'm in jail and I need you to bail me out. And I'm going to give you a number. Call this number and they're going to tell you where to send the money.'" And they hung up. And that was it. I didn't get to talk to you. And I've been trying to contact you, but you was in jail. So how did I know? So I just randomly finally decided before I called the number that I was going to try calling you at home to see if that was really you. And so that was a key piece
man.
that my dad did, because if he wouldn't have done that and assumed I really was in jail and called this number and followed through with it, then they would have been able to pull some information and maybe give him some money. But he thought about it enough to where he was like, well, I'm just going to see. Because, my wife could have called them and told them I was in trouble. The kids could have called them. Someone else would have called him and told him this, and he would have known about it. So he called home, and that's when I got that message. But the intrinsic details that people go through to try to catch someone and collect money is just phenomenal. The stories that they can come up with to phish someone is incredible. That's why I started this off saying someone should really make a movie about this stuff, right? This could really be a great movie when you think about all the different scenarios that a person could go through to kind of phish and get information from someone and then actually do a social engineering attack on someone.
And there are several known people who has, like Abernagel, for instance. The Catch Me If You Can movie is very...
Yep.
What he's doing is a lot of social engineering techniques. So true. There are different elements to it, as you say. I mean, there is the written one, it's the oral ones, it's the face-to-face with people. And there are, as you can see, it's the catfishing, the baiting, and it's also the scareware, as it says here, which is basically more of the extortion kind of thing. Like, what is really messing with people these days has been we have you on camera and we're going to sell the information unless you give us money. For instance.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. Like, they know, for instance.
Yeah, there's been a few people that have called our help desk and said, "Hey, I got this weird email," and that's exactly what it was. It was that, got you watching porn, or I'm like, just delete it. It's not real. But they're so freaked out. Yeah. They don't know what to think. It's like, man, what if somebody really tried to frame me with something like this? So they get really wigged out about stuff like that.
It comes in all forms. I mean, it comes with it comes in mails, and it's either in some sort of like, oh, your antivirus is out of date, for instance, or you're infected, and there's so many things and so many variables to it. And while this is not, one could think, oh yeah, but this is not social engineering, but it's all connected, because it's all the play on the human fear, for instance. And you play on the human emotion.
Yeah.
You can either play on, as Jason said, that his dad got scared. Of course. I mean, I would be really scared as well if my kid had called and said something like that. And you stop, and that's the essence of social engineering, what adversaries want you to do. They want you to stop and think. Stop thinking at all. Just not think. Just do. Just act on your emotions.
Yeah.
And the only
react on that.
The only way to prohibit it is to actually do as your father did, to just stop and think. Because you got to think. You got to leave the emotions to the side and start, continue on thinking rationally. But social engineering works when you play on people's emotions. You make them do rash decisions based on their emotions instead of their usually very intellectual mind, basically. So everyone can be lured, even me.
See, now, Bridget, you've educated me on something, because I always just called it the Jedi mind trick, but now I know I've been social engineering Kevin all the time, just getting him to do stuff. I was just calling it the Jedi mind trick.
Yeah, Jason, you're the craftiest of them all.
Session recap. Professional social engineers, or human hackers, will often play on your emotions and a sense of urgency to force you to make quick, illogical decisions. Watch for callers claiming to represent the IRS, Medicare, or the Social Security Administration. Unless you've requested contact, none of these federal agencies will ever initiate contact with you by email, text messages, or social media channels to request personal or financial information. Watch for frantic senses of urgency. Scammers will try to tap into your sense of fear using threats of arrest warrants and problems with your account. Watch for anyone asking for your personal information. They may ask you to confirm your name, address, birth date, social security number, bank account information, or any other identifying details. And finally, unfortunately, there is no African prince looking to give you his riches.
And we're back. So, in this next segment of the podcast, I think we want to get a little bit deeper into the contest that you won, the collegiate contest that you won, Bridget. And I got to tell you, I listened to the recording of that, and I was just amazed at some of the tactics that you went to win, right? And I remember this one part, right? I think I was listening to it, and I'm listening to the dialogue as you're going along, and I'm like, wow, this is pretty good. I mean, trying to get to the source and trying to get them pull on their emotional strings to give them more and give you more information. And it really was this, damsel in distress kind of play of, oh, please, 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 I need to get this done or I'll be in so much trouble, right? And it was just pulling those emotional heartstrings that if you just have anybody on the other side with any compassion, they're going to fall into it, right? They're going to have some hard decisions to make. And so that was all good. But what really set it apart, I think, which is the epitome of how good you are at thinking about tactics that can win, right? To get you to the solution that you're trying to get to. What really set it off for me was you start crying on the call. And we're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I mean, so you played this role out to the fullest extent, and it really set it apart. And for me, I can see how legitimate that exercise really was in helping you kind of get to the point where you won this contest. Because, I mean, you went all out in this thing. And the reality of it is that that's what really happens every day. That's what really happens. I mean, there's on the other side of this equation, pulling that information, collecting that information, and allowing that information to get you into a bigger pool of information is bank. It's a lot of money on the dark web, right? You could turn around and sell all that on the dark web and make a lot of money if you're malicious. And so people will go all out to try to collect that information. So I thought it would be interesting for you to tell us a little bit about some of the strategies that you used. One being the fact that you was an individual opponent. You were your own team. You didn't have anyone else on your team, but yet you still won against several teams of other opponents. So tell us a little bit about your strategy as you were going through this.
Yeah. First of all, the other teams, they were amazing, and I heard some of their calls as well. And I mean, I was still baffled by the fact that I won and not theirs, because there were so many good competitors there. And but I think that what's really set it off was that obviously crying was like, oh wait, what happened now? The element of surprise, obviously. But if I just roll back a bit and just say that I started out with my process. This was my first vision calls ever. We had 3 vision calls for the contest to get a certain amount of flags, and that was the last call of the 3 I had. And I only had 1 flag left by then, which was to open a web page, to get the other person on the other side to open a web page. And the other one I had captured in the other calls. And those were more straightforward, calling from IT support and thank you so much for your help and whatnot. And I had, by like half a day later, I just finished up my OSINT report of this location. And since this was a CTF, the collegiate CTF, there were the judges who were just going to play the role. So we sent in the pretext saying that we are going to call this person. And then so they kind of knew up front that, okay, I'm going to be a receptionist, I'm going to be an employee or whatnot. And even if I said, I'm going to call this person who has this role. So we kind of sent them in as more of a training exercise, like sort of a support wheel on the phishing contest. But it was still like they put in obstacles. They decided that this call is going to be hard. I'm going to put in these and these obstacles, stop them there, and so on. So during the pretext, I gathered information and I thought, what do I need? Which flag do I need to get? What is my goal? This is what I'm going in for. Like, is it 1? Is it 2 flags? What do I want from these people? And then I thought that, okay, how can I approach this? Which person should I call to get this flag? Who will most likely give it to me? And so for the last call, which is available online somewhere, it is I tried to call the reception of this place, trying to get help. As a damsel in distress, I played the role of a new employee. And I thought that, okay, so this is the department I'm thinking of. Okay, this is the boss. I found the boss on LinkedIn so I could name drop him. And because that was the initial thought. Okay, I'm going to be a person who has issues and I'm going to call a service-minded person. A receptionist is service-minded very often. So I'm going to call as a new employee from a temp agency they use because I can see that. And then, okay, so we have this background. And then this webpage should be related to a project that I found information on online. So everything was like these small hints that I know what I'm talking about, so that the receptionist would believe that I am actually that person without making them having to look, obviously. So that was the outline of it. And this was my first time, and I tried thinking, okay, I should say this and I should expect this answer, if this answer then this, and so on. And I realized quite quickly during my first call that nothing happens as you want it to. You just got to have this base, like, this is who I am. And the essence will always be the person I am initially. I cannot end up being a very assertive, bossy person, because I am not. As a person, I am not the person who can say, hey, you got to do this for me right now. It won't be real. And I will know it's not real. And if I don't believe it, then they won't believe it. So you got to tap into an emotion. And that's exactly what I did during that call. I just started out thinking that, okay, how would I feel if I was a new person in a new position? And this is how it would feel. And I tried using those emotions. It's sort of like improv art, basically, like when you do improvisation theater and stuff. And you just go from there, and then you just that role. That is your that's your person. And then you just let that guide you. So I prepared by gathering the info. So I had the details to say, this is who I am. And I am one of you. I'm part of the pack. I am an employee at the same place as you are. So I went in there. And when it comes to the crying, it was basically not planned at all. It was not planned.
It was good, though.
Thank you. It's sort of when he put me on hold, it was Tinkersek who was the judge who was going to have the call for me, and he was playing the role of the receptionist, and I'm going to talk to my boss and put you on hold. And so we did. And I was thinking, like, okay, I have nothing more to lose. It's just this one flag. And this is a training exercise. I mean, personally, on the mission, I would not resort to crying. I feel like that is the all-time low, playing on those emotions. Really. But I had to try it once. And so Tinker was the poor victim of that. And I just started to sniffle, build myself up a bit when it was on hold, because usually when people are on hold, they still kind of hear it. So if I started bawling out, it would sound. So I just started off with like this. Like, you just start like that, and And when we just came back and it's like, hi, like just continue on sniffles. And when they ask you if you're all right, you kind of just cracks and you just tap into a memory. For me, it was just, I just tap into a memory thinking how it's something I can be sad. What is that emotion? And they just try to use that emotion. And because I wasn't in real life crying, but I had the essence of that emotion, like the desperation and the feeling. I just found sort of a thing that I could relate to that and just use that emotion for that. So that's why it sounded real, probably. And just let me tell you that when I told my husband that I managed to fake cry, and he was like, "Was that surprising?" Because he was like, "I knew you could do that all along."
So now he's like, wait a minute. Is this fake or is this real?
Oh, he hears the difference.
Your husband seems to know you. He knows all your tricks already, doesn't he?
We've been together for almost half our lives now, since we were teens. Yeah. So he kind of knows me. So he's sort of like, when he listens to the recording, well, I can hear it's not real. But that's because he knows me. And but most people would not. And for me, it is not something I think is 100% okay, this is cool to do. So during a pen testing, I would rarely play the damsel in distress, but it's sort of a, during that event, it was sort of a, okay, this can actually work. The damsel in distress for me as a female, I mean, let's just face it, the world of social engineering is very gender biased, basically. You can, I mean, if Jason would have started crying on that phone call, people would just freak out a bit. Like, why are you crying, dude?
They'd be like, they'd be like, dude, what a wuss, man up.
And I mean, in an idealistic world, it shouldn't be like that. But we live in a world where if you are a female and you are very pretty looking, you get better service. I mean, at the store, you get better service. That's the truth. And I mean, I am a very tall woman. I'm 5'10". It's kind of intimidating to a lot of people when they see me, especially when you meet guys who are shorter than me, because that happens. And so if I would have been a very petite woman, it would have been, and I would go somewhere, I would be seen more of a damsel in distress automatically, rather than me more like, oh, I'm tall and I'm more heavily built. I'm like, I can fend for myself, like sort of like thing. And and of course, if you are very, very, if you look like with those dare eyes and everything, and so it's easier. I mean, it's easier for me to play damsel in distress than Jason, but it's also easier for a more petite woman to play a damsel in distress than for me, for instance. So
that's very interesting. You're hitting on some really interesting points there, because so much of what has been pre-programmed into our brains it comes into play in social engineering. And you can't just, like you said, you come into this with your predefined pretext. You know the story you're going to go with. You know the role of the person you're going to be playing. You've already got that in your head, but it's never going to go exactly according to plan, because every human is completely different about how they perceive how you're approaching them, what your ask is, and there's a different level of caution that each person would use in those situations, and you have to feel that out as you're going. And like you said, it is ad lib. A lot of it just becomes ad lib. I've got to have a backup plan here. If they go this direction, I got to go that direction. It's really, there's so much to it.
One thing too that I keep hearing this theme of is it's really profiling. I mean, you're profiling someone, and you're picking out key aspects of their personality that you are recognizing that you can play on, that you can do something with. Right?
Yeah.
And it might,
as you go,
and some of that could also be what is society's acceptance of a few things, right? And what side of society's acceptance does this person land on? Oh, this person's on this side. That means that they're likely to be like this and this and this. And you try a few things
they're Republican,
Right.
they're Democrat.
Try a few things out, and they
Yeah,
start going down the
there's-
trail, and you've just profiled them.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
just for instance, Kevin, you said you were in the area of Texas, for instance, wasn't it? Yeah.
right.
If you
Right.
are there,
Yeah,
there is
yeah.
a difference being there and being in New York, for instance, on how
Absolutely
you
there
would
is.
interact with people. I know people from Texas and I know people from New York, and they are quite differing in their opinions, and you gotta use that for what it's worth. I mean, it's not like, yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to get political here, so I'm not going to spend time using any topics, but it is sort of like, for instance, if you talk to, as a Norwegian talking to an American, and I mean, we talked a bit about this off the recording, that
Yeah.
in Norway there are less religiousness in general, for instance. But if I talk to an American, I know that the cultural differences are there. That several more people go more to church. They have a more culture for it, and you gotta take that into
Sure.
notice. Like, for instance, in Norway, we don't have. I never held a gun in my life, for instance, because it's not quite common in Norway. But if I go to certain states, it is quite common to hold a gun, and you got to get
Yeah.
into it, and that's how you do in social engineering as well. If I go to the countryside, if I go to the city, or even if you just go to the neighboring country, if I go to Sweden, there are differences there as well in how you act and interact with people, the phrases, everything goes into play, and even it's just the gender, the age, what they've lived through. If there's a veteran, for instance, they have different opinions on life, and everyone is different. And
Sure.
a lot of the pretexting and preparedness goes into knowing the person before you interact with them. If you are able to know who you're going to meet, you tend to check out their social media profiles, for instance. Do they have any opinions? Are they very opinionated people? Are they borderline something like into, I don't know, theories about anything? So then you kind of like, you
Yeah.
try to level the playing field here a bit, just to try to not step on their toes. Like, you got to diminish your own ego. You have a ego suspension needs to be great, and that's often something a person do when you meet someone new, usually, and you got to do that as well as a social engineering person. Basically, you got to diminish yourself a lot so that you will just be sort of a mirror reflection of that person, because they will trust you. They will feel like you're part of my tribe. You and I are the same. You understand me, mate.
Right.
Like
right.
that. You got to be like that. And
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, if I meet a man who is very much against women's rights, for instance, and I cannot diminish that. Like, I cannot diminish myself completely, like saying that, oh yeah, we shouldn't be allowed to do anything. Like, I couldn't do that. So that would be like impossible for me to, get to that person.
Sure.
So you got to find a middle ground. And you usually do that with people at work, for instance. If you meet someone who's very opinionated in the other direction, for instance, if you're a Republican and meet a Democrat,
Yeah.
etc., and they're very, very on each side, they kind of find the middle ground, and that you got to do as well as a social engineering as a social engineer. Basically, you got to find that middle ground.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're doing that on steroids in the social.
Yeah,
engineering
and you were
area.
talking about
It's
like
pretty
being
wild.
in your pack or your group, right? And that ability that as humans we like being and identifying our pack, and that is that common ground, right? Where can we find common ground that we feel like we're in the same group together?
Smishing or SMS phishing attacks come in many shapes and sizes. But if you're ever in doubt, never click the links in these text messages. Always contact the businesses directly, go through the web, or pick up a phone, but always deal with them directly, especially on account issues.
So, Bridget, it sounds like, the work that you do when you're doing social engineering can be very emotionally draining, right? And it here's the thing that I heard in all that you were saying. If you think about all the different aspects of social engineering, this is how you can tell you're one of the good people in this event, because you're sharing how hard it is afterwards. I mean, your whole talk is about how hard it is afterwards when you think about what you've just done to these individuals, and that they've been deceived. And then how do you go back and repair this deception? How do you rebuild that natural human trust between people, because you was just doing a job, right? And the difference is there are people out there who don't care. Those are the malicious actors. They're doing it. They don't care about you trusting and deceiving you. That's their whole purpose. But and the emotional impact of them probably is not as great as the emotional impact to someone like yourself who's doing this for good reason. So tell us a little bit more about how you deal with that.
Yeah, that's still a work in progress, but I usually tend to deal with it by processing it, and I also recommend to all the customers we have that we have a debriefing, that I get to
Mm.
talk to the people that I've been in contact with extensively, to let them talk through it. Sort of like you just walk through the scenario, you just talk about it as something that has happened, so that everyone can feel that they have closure, including myself, that I have the closure afterwards. Like I know they are all right, sort of, because you never know what kind of people you meet. You never know if they have a bad day, or if they have bad mental health. Like you don't know, and when you don't know and you haven't reset it all by doing a debrief, you sort of think like, but how did they feel? So for me, part of the process is to know that they are all right. That
Mm.
is the most important part for me, to know that they are taken care of by their company, to know that they are mentally aware that, okay, this was a test, but it's not totally on me. Like this is part of the process of improving the controls surrounding me. The physical controls for me, not letting people in, the policies and so on, so that they don't feel like I failed. Like they for me that's important, and for me that also helps me to feel that my work is more complete. Like I don't leave them off hanging, sort of. So that's what helps me to process it and move on, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not always possible, but in an ideal world, that's, in my opinion, how it should be done. That when we test, it shouldn't be a blame game. It should be something you work towards
Right.
improving together after a
Yeah,
test.
yeah, definitely.
That's a really great point. I mean, I think about when we're doing phishing testing at where I work, and if you click on something, you're automatically enrolled in additional
Yeah.
training. But they're feeling that emotion of, oh man, I just messed up, and now I got to go take this training. But you're opening my eyes to some things too here, because you don't really think about the other side of that. It's like, okay, they did the training now. There should be some kudos or accolades for that, and remind them this isn't a blame game. It's more about educating you so that not only we're protecting our data assets here at the company, but also you can take this home with you. You can take this knowledge and protect your own personal identity by knowing these things. But yeah, I can see where a personal aspect of it could still be a major, major factor there for them, and for you, or for me, or for whoever has to do this stuff for a living.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting topic, and I've never heard it brought up before. So I'm going to make sure we get to go see that when you do your talk at Defcon. I want to try to be in the room. Of course, if I can get in a long line to get in there, things going to probably be wrapped around half the, Caesars or wherever they're having it this year. But looking forward to that. That's going to be really cool. That's great. That's great stuff, and a great insight that I wouldn't have thought about otherwise. I'd like to shift gears here and ask if you've got any really interesting or exciting examples that you can share with us about some funny people that have been vished or socially engineered in a way that was kind of out of the ordinary, that kind of sticks out to you, that you found entertaining or humorous. You have any of those kind of
Oh
stories?
yeah, there's one at the top of my head. It's sort of not very technical, but it's sort of the fun plot twist, and that was I listened to a talk on Layer 8 once where I heard that Snow talked about a test where she was in a building and she met one of the guards, and she was like up and leaving, and like needed to get out of there, sort of like to not break her cover. And then outside, I think there was a skunk, and she didn't want to leave the building. So the whole conundrum of like, I gotta leave here now because I'm in here, not supposed to be here. I'm in a social engineering job, and then
Yeah.
like, oh, but there's a skunk outside. Like, I don't want to go in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Conundrum.
I'm gonna go ask this guy that I just tricked if he can walk me to my car.
The player is being played by nature.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
sort of the
man.
unexpected
Right.
things. Like, what do you
Right.
do? And I mean, I heard several people sitting hours at the end at toilets just waiting for people to pass by. And
Oh
there's so
man.
many funny stories out there that, like, you gotta do everything just with a blink of an eye, take an 180 and just turn around and do whatever and just figure something out. And there's so many stories out there, and I recommend people, if they're really interested, to just look it up and listen to it. And just, well, of course, remember that it should always be done with ethically, and
Yeah.
be treated well
Yeah,
afterwards,
of
because
course.
there are
Yeah.
people being duped into doing this. I mean, it's always the fun stories, but there are also people involved. So luckily,
Yeah.
those,
Yeah.
at least the skunk one is really funny.
Important.
So I had one once.
Yeah.
I had one once. This was several years ago, but I got called, and it was the traditional one. It was when this just started happening around Apple support, right? This is Apple support, and we're calling you because there's been a breach in your account, and we need you to verify a few things, right? They called me the first time. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever, and I hung up. Well, they wouldn't stop. And they called me like 4 or 5 more times throughout that same day. And by the last time they called me, I was on my way home, and I'm like, this is enough. And they called me, and I'm like, okay, whatever. So they started their dialogue, and they started asking me all this stuff, and I'm like, oh, really? Oh my gosh, I'm so worried about. Are you serious? I mean, like, is my data gone? I mean, what happened? Did I lose my account? I mean, I got to do something, right? I start playing it right back on them, and we're 30 minutes into this call, and they're asking me for information. They says, well, so I need your account password so I can log in and verify some things. And I'm like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. What do you mean? Why do you need my password? I mean, shouldn't you have admin access into my account, and you should be able to do what you need to do? And I mean, what are you talking about? I mean, I'm not understanding this. And I had the person so flustered on the other side because they could not get the key things that they were trying to get. And every time they would ask, I'd throw some other wrench into the equation. And then I finally was like, I said, okay, hold on a second. I have to put you on hold. I'm sorry. And I was driving, so I just held the phone like this for a good 5 minutes. And then I came back. I said, oh, okay. So I would like to thank you very, very much, because while you were on hold, we traced your line, and the FBI is about to show up at your location. So good day. And before I hung up, I could hear the guy cussing me out and yelling at me. What? I was just trying to help you. I'm trying to help you get your account back. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. I hung up on him.
Oh man. Meanwhile, there's a whole audience of people as he's sitting on stage in a soundproof booth, going, "Well, I guess I failed that one." Oh man, that's pretty good. I got one that's kind of interesting. I was trying to think of how to, keep people nameless here. I'm with a friend, and we're giving a literally, this is true story. We're giving a presentation on cybersecurity, user awareness mainly, and cybersecurity. And we're giving this presentation to some executives, and we get out of that presentation. We're like, man, that went pretty well. And my friend's like, yeah, it really did. And meanwhile, he's getting a call from his wife. And she says, oh, yeah, let me take this. So he takes the call. While we were giving our presentation, she had received a call from the deputy sheriff of the county they lived in. And the guy convinced her that if she didn't pay for this warrant that was out for her arrest, he was going to have to come that night to pick her up at their residence. He had her address. He had all of her first, last name, the county she lived in, enough evidence to say, I'm going to be convincing in what I'm saying here and trick this person into sending me this money. And of course, she fell for the whole wire the money through Western Union at a Walmart to this random account to clear her name. And he stayed on the phone with her through the entire process, 45 minutes, while she wired this money. It was $900 something, like $950. And my friend, he's like, you didn't pay that, did you? And she's like, well, yeah, but I'm starting to wonder if this, because he hung up on me and now he's not answering the call when I'm calling, because you just got ripped off. You just got scammed. And he's so mad because we just literally trained people on things like this. And his wife, meanwhile, is being fished in the real world by this random phone call and wired $950 to this guy, thinking it was the sheriff of their county. But he had his story, man. He had his pretext because he was like, I know you have children, and to avoid any kind of embarrassment, we don't want to have to put you in handcuffs in front of your kids. And she's like, oh, my husband's out of town and they're doing training in another state. No, we can't have that. So, her first instinct was panic and react because she couldn't get a hold of him. She's texting him, calling him, but, texting him while she's on this phone call, but he couldn't respond.
Well,
we were given a presentation.
I got to tell you, I mean, we've covered so much in this episode that is very enlightening, and in ways that I think the majority of our audience, I could tell you that the majority of our audience probably have not thought about social engineering in the aspect of the amount of work that is necessary to perform a social engineering attack on someone. And then secondly, the emotional weight that is associated with it afterwards. Yeah. I mean, that part of this conversation, I don't think I've ever heard a conversation around. And that's equally important. I think the third thing that is a testament to you, Bridget, and the work that you've done is your efforts to achieve the success that you have achieved to date is astounding. I mean, the work that you've put into it, the accomplishments that you were able to obtain, all this while being a mother of 3 kids, it's a lot of work, and cybersecurity in general is a lot of work, but you've done a great job in your accomplishments, and want to congratulate you on that too, and your speaking engagement and everything to come going forward. So I really enjoyed the conversation. I think this was one of our best conversations that we've had. I mean, we have a lot of good conversations on our podcast, and this one will be up there with all the rest of them. It really is a good piece to add into our podcast episodes. And I'd just like to thank you, and hope that we could have you on again to talk more about it and learn more about the work that you're doing.
I would love it.
Bridget, I just want to say one thing in addition to what Jason just said. I just want to say thank you for coming on. This has been great. I've loved the discussion. And I just want to say 1 year in the near future, I want to see you on that stage at the Social Engineering Village doing the phishing live. That would be so cool to be in the audience rooting you on. So hopefully we get to see that one day, because I know you can do it. I know you can.
Maybe one day. And thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast. And it's always fun to talk about social engineering. It's really a passion of mine. So it's hard to not talk too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
All right. Well, with that, we're
All
going to
right.
close this episode
Well, thank you.
out, and we'll thank you again, and we will see you guys next time.
Cheers.
We referenced a talk upcoming at Defcon 30 that Bridget will be giving on the psychological aspect of social engineering pen tests. The title of the discussion is The Aftermath of a Social Engineering Pen Test, and Are We Being Ethically Responsible? If you're going to be at Defcon this year, try to catch the talk live at the Social Engineering Village. Otherwise, look for it after the conference over the web.
Hello, everyone. If you enjoyed the podcast today, I'm excited to share with you that you can now listen to us on all of these major streaming platforms. Also, if you learned anything from the conversation today, please share this episode with your friends, family, and colleagues. The more of this knowledge we can share, the more cybersecure we all become. I'd say like, subscribe, and all of that jazz, but hey, you're not morons. You know that. I will leave you with some words of wisdom, though, from the former director of the FBI, Mr. Robert S. Mueller III. He said there are only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. You guys be safe, remain diligent, and take care.